Good morning again from my aquarium again. I wanted to talk to you guys about an issue that we're very likely to be facing if you are not already facing it, because many people already live it in their homes, in their personal lives, and that is how to find freedom under oppression while you're still living in an oppressive environment where you don't have power and control. Excuse me. And I say this is also known as overcoming your codependent programming. People who are raised in a very abusive environment frequently struggle with codependency. In codependency, people have talked about it from here to forever, but my experience of it really has been, if you have like a patriarchy is by its nature a cultic system. It's really a small cult in which there is a leader who is responsible for the community. They're responsible for teaching the community. The community looks to them for their answers, and cohesion in the community is maintained by, rewarding those who comply and applying various pressures and punishments to those who don't, to keep everybody all in line. There's in-groups and out-groups and, the whole nine. So that is... that's a patriarchal system. Well, that obviously is, problematic in and of itself, but inevitably you're going to end up with a corrupted person at the top of this cultic system. And that corrupted person is going to train everyone around them, use their power to train everyone around them to look out for them, to think about them, to protect them. If you've spent time with somebody who is narcissistic, one of the things you'll realize pretty quickly is that they believe that everybody else is responsible for their internal state. So if they're angry, it's because this person did X, Y, Z. And of course, sometimes people legitimately do X, Y, Z, but I think about, for example, in a family system where, a grown adult is unable to manage their emotional response to a small child's behavior, and it's the small child's fault and not the adult's responsibility to be able to manage their anger, right? So when you have somebody like that who is outsourcing all of the responsibility, evading all of the accountability, there's no mutuality. The only safety to be found is in making the cult leader happy, not disturbing them. And even then they're still gonna be mad at you, but you can at least, if nothing else, you can maintain your internal, I didn't do anything wrong. Which fat lot of good that does you. But yeah, so, and you can't, so of course you're being programmed to look out to have your life center around someone other than yourself, and it's very deeply rooted, especially for women. It always bothers me the way that Eve was named Eve because she was the mother of all. And it's okay, so I don't get it. So that's the definition of her, is the mother, is the definition of Adam the father. No, he's just a man. Anyways, but so when you're in one of these systems, the first step, because this is what happened to me, was I reached middle school age and I began kind of rebelling against, internally what was going on. I began kind of being more free. And then I had a spiritual experience with God. I took to prayer and meditation. I began, kind of reprogramming myself. And one of the things I realized almost immediately when I began kind of examining what was going on in my own head was I realized that my father took up a wildly disproportionate amount of my mental space. I was aware of where he was. I was aware of what mood he was in. I was aware of, I was aware of what he thought about everything. Everything I was doing was running with this acting model of my father in the background, who was, everything is being gauged by his and my mom's and my siblings, but, mostly his response. And I realized, like, one of the things that I've always kind of believed is that if somebody does something crappy to you, like, yeah, you have to deal with it, but then get over it as quickly as you can, because it's bad enough you had to go through that. Why, like, allow it to continue to harm you? They don't get that kind of power over me, like, you don't get to do that to me. So, yeah, if you want to hit me, I'll take the hit, but I'm going to come back from it. So, I recognized, like, that my dad was taking up way too much space in my head, and I needed to free myself from that. And so part of that really became paying attention to when I was thinking about him, like catching myself thinking about him. And at first I had to, like, insert other things. Like, sometimes this was where I would insert prayers, like repetitive prayers, just wrote prayers, or song lyrics or something. Sometimes I would make up a specific sentence that would, that would serve as, like, counterweight, like a substitute thought, until I had taught my brain to think that substitute rather than to think about my dad. And in time, I was able to not devote so much of my mental space, because I was, like, doing things like ruminating. I was, telling myself the stories of the things that happened and were happening. And as I was able to free up the space that I had previously used worrying about my dad and what he thought and what he was doing and where he was, and, remembering all the terrible things he had done, I had mental energy to pay attention to other things. I could think about school. I could think about people at school. I could solve problems. I could, move about much more freely in the world. I didn't worry about, what someone, what he would think of how I was behaving in an environment he wasn't even in. I didn't care how he thought I was behaving in an environment I wasn't in. I wasn't causing problems. I wasn't doing anything bad. It's not like I was running around I was, like, going to mass, like, I was not a difficult child, I assure you. I'm one of those people who, like, if you can't get along with me, that probably says something about you. Not always. I can be difficult, I understand. But generally speaking, as a very, very good rule of thumb, if you can't get along with Rebecca's probably not the problem. Because I do just fine. So... And then as I got older, and of course I, wound up in this marriage with a psycho, and there are times, especially if you're feeling anxious, if you're in trauma, where, of course, that original programming, it doesn't just disappear because you've overridden it. It will keep cropping up. It's, it's just wiring. It was put in place. You can, neglect it and leave it for lack of use, and it will become much weaker. But in a stress state, it will tend to come back up. And so there were times I had to really catch myself. It was one of these things that we would talk about in therapy, because there was one time where I was so keenly attuned to my ex that I would notice he was thirsty before he did. There were a couple times I literally brought him a cup of water and he was like, "How did you know I was thirsty?" I am a very empathetic person. If I'm experiencing your thirst before you are, I'm too tuned into that person. They're taking up way too much space in my mind. And so then you just have to notice when you're doing it and force yourself to stop. Give yourself something else to do. And going along with this, the other part is you really have to decouple your emotions from their emotions. So just because somebody is angry doesn't mean you have to be scared. Okay? I understand it's a natural thing, but quite often you have somebody who's glowering. You say, "What's the matter?" And they say nothing. They said nothing, accept it and carry on. And when you catch yourself having those emotions, that's your inner child. Talk to that little person in you and say, it's okay. They can be angry. They're allowed to be angry. They're even allowed to be in a bad mood. And if they start to be mean, we'll stop them, but we can just let them be angry. It's not about me. Because part of that codependent thing is, it's formed in childhood. So you have that kind of child perspective that whatever is going on, it's about me. It's not. And you need to teach yourself. You need to teach your brain. You need to teach your nervous system. No, we are not going to take care of other people's needs before they even know they have them. That's fine sometimes. And if you have somebody who's treating you well, I don't know. It's good to do nice, kind things for people. But when it's compulsive and you are like, that's what you're doing, you're not doing other things because that's what you're doing. You're doing it in order to feel safe. It's not healthy. That's not even love. Honestly, it's really not. You're still trying to manage and manipulate another person. And I understand you may need to do some of that for your own safety, but it can't be a way of life. It can't be the way your brain works. That person does not deserve, nor do they have the right to take up that much space in your brain. So you really need to pay attention to what's going on, teach yourself. And the upside of this is that if you can develop enough resiliency and self-awareness and internal self-discipline to manage your emotional reactions, to keep your mind focused on what you intend to focus it on, rather than, letting your kind of like autonomic fear response take you off onto something that's not beneficial to you. If you can do that in such an intimate setting that, like living with somebody who's narcissistic and abusive, then you are going to be so much better equipped to navigate out in the world. And God forbid that we end up in a situation where you literally, where it's like living inside an abusive home. I mean, look at the women in Afghanistan and what they're doing to them right now. They're talking about mass deportations. That's going to be people in concentration camps who are going to have to deal with that, and the more internal control you have over your mind and over your emotions and the more self-discipline. And it's like anything else, you have to practice, you have to practice, you have to practice. You don't get good at things by thinking about them. You get good at things by doing them. So you actually have to practice doing these things, and they will provide you so much protection against people who, they may not be able to provide you all the protection or any protection against a really hostile outer world, but you can maintain yourself. You can maintain your, your humanity and your ability to manage, have your own internal world that isn't simply being dictated by the world outside of you. And that is an incredibly, incredibly valuable and powerful thing to have. And if you have found yourself in one of these situations where you're living with, a mini cultic despot, and you work on this, then you are miles and miles ahead of where somebody who's never had to deal with such a thing on such a personal level will be on the day that they no longer have external freedom. God forbid should it happen. So anyways, that's just kind of my insight and a few words of wisdom about, those codependent tendencies and maintaining mental, emotional, spiritual, psychic freedom under oppression. So love you all. I'll talk to you later. Bye.